Jonathan, your favorite moment.
The Stasi saved the world, but they couldn't save East Germany. Well, my choice of a scary moment of the nuclear age is perhaps paradoxical and counterintuitive, because normally it's being seen as a wonderful moment, which it also was, by the way, and I'm speaking of the end of the Cold War. What's also notable about it is that in the nuclear realm, really nothing happened effectively, nothing on a big scale in the nuclear area, and it's that very nothing that seems to me to be definitive about that moment, because it seems to me that a prime characteristic of the nuclear age now, most regrettably, as we close out the sixth decade, has been that we haven't done enough. So that not doing enough is really what I want to talk about. Let me just set the stage by reading, Dick mentioned the Reykjavik summit, just to set the stage here. Because there were some very bold things, as we know now, and especially since the records of the meetings have become available. And let me just read a quotation from the Reykjavik summit. This was a late night meeting, I think the last of the summit, and a plan was brought forward to get rid of all ballistic missiles. And
Brought forward by whom?
Brought forward by the American team, from a team that was in another room. It was brought into the negotiating room with Reagan and Gorbachev, and also Secretary of State Schultz there. And Gorbachev said, well, now this only mentions ballistic missiles. What about the rest of them? Could we get rid of those? And Reagan says, fine. Let's get rid of them all. And Gorbachev says, we can do that, we can eliminate them. And then this is my favorite line, and maybe one of my favorite lines of the whole nuclear age, and it comes from that usually undramatic character, Secretary of State Schultz. He just bursts out, let's do it. So here he is. He's with the two decision makers. It's not the end of an after-dinner speech or something. It's something real. It's something in the urgency of the moment. Well, we know very well that it didn't happen, of course, because SDI was really the deal maker for Reagan, and it was the deal breaker for Gorbachev, and they couldn't get it together with the results that we know. Anyway,
I'm sure everyone knows that SDI is colloquially referred to as Star Wars.
Yeah,
okay.
SDI is Star Wars, thank you. Anyway, we come to the end of the Cold War, and this is the kind of bold thinking that had gone on towards the end of the Cold War, while the Cold War was still going on. So it certainly raised hope, certainly in my breast, that even more bold proposals would be forthcoming. After all, the end of the Cold War was, in my view, something like a miracle, an unexpected thing. And this unexpected miracle seemed to call for a deliberate miracle, as I saw it, in the nuclear field. Well, in a word, it didn't happen. Instead, we got that nothing. Along with it, we got assurances which ring strangely today. I'll just read out what President Clinton had to say back at that time. In this world, our children are growing up free from the shadows of the Cold War and the threat of a nuclear holocaust. Well, we know better now than to think that threat had gone away. There was one brief episode, and I don't want to belabor it. It was the Nuclear Posture Review, 1993, 1994, following the bottom-up review in the Defense Department. It was really launched by Les Aspin, and Ashton Carter, who will be talking later today, can address the details better than I can. I won't try to. It's a long story, but it had a very short ending. And the short ending was that basically everything remained as before. Ballistic missiles were not gotten rid of, much less nuclear weapons as a whole. The triad remained intact, and one official said that we pretty much got the Cold War posture, but just with somewhat fewer weapons. And basically, business went on as usual. Now, as I say, I'm not going to go into the details in that, but I'll just make a comment about it. And that is that certainly, across the board, one of the most riddlesome questions of the nuclear age is the relationship of nuclear arsenals to political objectives, whether you're looking at military strategy or disarmament strategy. Now here, as it seemed to turn out, after this true revolution in international affairs, nothing dramatic was done in the nuclear field. And so it seemed, and so it still seems to me, that it turned out that no political justification at all was needed in order to have a very large nuclear arsenal, which certainly couldn't be justified by anything else at that time or since, such as rogue states or terrorism or what have you. Maybe a couple of them, if some would argue. I'd argue otherwise, but certainly not an arsenal of 10,000, 5,000, 3,000 nuclear arms. So, we like to say, and I think it's true, that during the Cold War, a most invaluable tradition of non-use gained traction. We'll see if it holds. But it was a very good thing and something very well worth holding on to. But also another tradition gained traction, I'm afraid, and that was that the tradition of possession. Because really the idea was instilled that nuclear weapons were really now part of the world's furniture. You didn't need an emergency such as you'd had in the Cold War in order to maintain them. You could just keep them sort of for a rainy day. Now that lesson, it seems to me, although it was rather unnoticed here in the United States, I can't speak for Russia where some similar process must have gone on, others can speak to it, was very much noticed in other parts of the world where we now see nuclear proliferation. I'm thinking, of course, of India, which spoke of a nuclear paradigm. And what they meant was that happily, most of the world was covered by nuclear arsenals, nuclear deterrence in one way or another, but poor, unfortunate India lacked this privilege and planned to obtain it, and did so, with the result that South Asia is now nuclearized. So that nothing that occurred or failed to occur, or whatever nothing does, at the end of the Cold War did set a benchmark and set a paradigm, if you like, that is very much with us today and exacting a high cost.